Aloha, I'm Felicia Miller Johnson, and I conduct work life video interviews with career professionals that become an all intuitive conversation. Aloha, I'm Felicia Miller Johnson, and welcome to another episode of All Intuitive Conversation. I connect with my guests through Sekhem energy, all in the hopes to encourage everyone watching to live smart and ascend to new levels of success in your work and life. Today, I have the pleasure of connecting with Gramps Jeffrey. So let's add him to the screen. Aloha, Gramps Jeffrey.
Aloha, Felicia.
How are you today?
I am rearing to go today.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to assume if you're going by Gramps Jeffrey, do you have grandchildren?
I've got six grandkids. In fact, my book, which came out called "This Don't Want to Turn Three," is about my six grandchildren. It's a true story. It's about
Mm.
it's about how they work together to learn how to turn three. So it's a true story based on my grandkids.
Okay, so how did turn three? So six of them, they didn't all turn three at the same time, did they? Or like
No,
what's
but all but one of them has now turned three.
okay.
So
Okay.
living this past year because of the pandemic caused by COVID-19, in
Mm-hmm.
isolation, except for being able to be with our family, it gave me a special time to watch and interact with all these grandkids. And I got to tell you what a trip that was. All six of these kids have completely different personalities. The one thing, but they do have in common is a sense of curiosity. How excited they get when they do accomplish something, something new. Watching them grow year to year and how they interact with each other really is the basis for my book. What goes through a toddler's mind? The parents are so desperate to understand. When does this toddler really understand the difference between me and us? This book explores how a family finds out together. You know, as a baby boomer myself, trying to understand how the world has evolved since I was 3 years old is also part of the story. When I was growing up, my parents didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have cable TV, they didn't have remotes. I was my dad's roadie. He said, "Son, go change the channel."
That part.
Yeah, my parents' definition of discipline is quite different than the parents of today. Has today's world made for a better place for children to grow up? I'll let your listeners kind of answer that question, as they weigh against how they were treated growing up versus how we're treating our kids today.
Hmm. Okay. So that was a lot. And so I've already got like two cards here, which is interesting that I have this gentleman on this boat juggling two things out in the sea. And so it really kind of reminds me of juggling life and how you deal with all these different things as probably as a 3 year old and as a parent as a 3 year old. The next card that came out here was a gentleman that is a youthful energy. And it says on here logical, perceptive, insightful, blunt, and exciting intellectual change, brilliant insights, information that you need but might be challenging to receive. So the question that's coming through for a 3 year old, their vocabulary is not as probably in depth as an adult would be. So, you being an adult today, what would you say to a 3 year old of how to enjoy life?
Well, the real question is at what age do we all begin to take responsibility for our actions? You know,
Hmm.
3 years old? Is it 13 years old? Is it 23 years old? Again, I've got plenty of my contemporaries that are 63 years old that still don't take responsibility for their actions.
Hmm.
So that's really what you want to start to begin as these children turn from 2 to 3 to 4. is to teach them to start to take responsibilities for what they do. Yeah, and
Mhm.
the 3-year-old is probably about when it all begins.
Okay. But as an adult, what is the lesson that you would explain to a 3-year-old about life in a 3-year-old's language? What would you say?
I would say to a 3-year-old that just enjoy life, be honest. What's interesting about 2 and 3 and 4-year-old kids is they haven't really learned how to lie yet. So
Mm.
whatever comes out of their mouth is the truth. I mean, I went to my 3-year-old granddaughter's birthday about 3 months ago. She was turning 3, and we're sitting there and we're talking, and she says, "Gramps, you have a big belly." Now, who else is going to tell me that? Is my wife going to tell me that, or my cousin's going to tell me that? No, it's a 3-year-old that says, "Gramps, you've got a big belly." So they are so honest. If we get them to keep that honesty when they turn 6 and 10 and 16 and 20, can you imagine how different this world would be?
Yes, it's interesting that you just say that because the next card that came out talked about nourishment and it had the essential oil about grapefruit. But listening to what your grandbaby just said to you, the bottom of the card says, cherish your body and the way it supports you. And so, yeah, you could be offended, by that, but that was just another encouraging word to like, hey, cherish what your body is now and how it, supports you today. So yeah, so kids can definitely say the darndest things, but yet it is very truthful in that regards. So what is something that someone has said to you that encouraged you while you were writing your book?
What's interesting when I was writing my book, I
Mhm.
kind of thought about, why am I doing this? What is it? And I got to say that we are raising kids today between 1 and 10-year-old are going to be the greatest generation this country has ever pulled together. And the reason being is that as soon as they come out of the womb, they're on the internet. They got their iPhones, they got their internet. I didn't get on the internet till I was 40 years old. These kids are coming out, if I want to find something on my phone, I got to talk to one of my kids how to do it. So what what happens is this is going to be the greatest generation ever, and they because of the knowledge. Now we
Mhm.
as adults and parents have got to be able to offset all this with real life experiences. So
Mm.
go back to why did I write this book? What is it about this book? Well, one of the greatest things that we as parents and grandparents is to get our kids into reading as early as possible, get them into books as soon as we can. I mean, why should you do that? Well, obviously I want everybody to read my book, but there's 100 other great books out there too. And these books, children's books take 20 minutes to read, so it's not a big endeavor. But think about what happens during that 20 minutes.
Mm.
Again, picturing 2, 3, 4-year-olds. The first thing that happens if you got, and I just picture my 3-year-old sitting on my lap as we're opening up a book, my book or another book, and we start to read. The first thing it does is it creates a bonding time. So
Yeah.
you've got 20 minutes now with a little 3-year-old sitting on your lap, and it gives you a nice chance to spend some time together, quality time together. So teaching them how to read and listen to books creates bonding. Another thing it does, it supports listening skills. Now, you and I both know that the most important skill that we have is listening. You for listening for your interviews, me for listening for sales. We have to listen first before we can really learn and communicate. So
Yeah.
having them sit on your lap for 20 minutes supports listening skills. It requires them to listen. Another reason why we need to have these kids learning how to read when they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, it develops cognitive and language skills. Earlier you said, how do you communicate to a kid? Well, there are plenty of words in these books that these kids just don't understand. It gives you a
Mm.
explain exactly what they are and what they mean. There's plenty of words in these books I don't understand. I got to look up. But it gives you that chance to create the cognitive and language development that you were referring to a little bit earlier. And another reason we should be doing it creates attention span. When you're 2, 3, 4 years old, you're bouncing off all the wall all day long. You got them in your lap for 20 minutes. It creates
Mm,
concentration and self-discipline. So I encourage your listeners, if they have grandkids or children, make sure that every night you take the time to spend time, read a book with them. Because again, that's going to help them learn and offset all this great information that they're learning on their internet and iPhones.
yes, I love that, Jeffrey. So, the next one that came out had the concept of grace, and it says, "What do they have that I don't?" The true statement says, "We are all special." And so that was so relating to me in the fact of connecting with your grandchildren and having that special moment. And we're saying grandchildren, but the reality is this book can be for anyone. Um, if you have grandchildren or not, like I said, you could be reading to your own kids. It doesn't have to be a grandparent reading to their grandchildren. So definitely don't want to put any kind of limit in that regard to that. So the next thing that's come to me is um, you have your book there, and the number two is coming out. So would you just read to us or show us the picture that is on page two of your book?
Page 2. Okay. Well, that's Jordan. He's the one that's turning 3. Now,
Okay, so he's two now. Okay.
interestingly enough, the card you just pulled, you said Grace. Well,
Yes.
my 3-year-old granddaughter, who has told me I had a big belly, is named Grace.
Of course it
Yeah.
is. Yes.
So, I mean that works out. That works out really really well.
Yes.
On that. You know, I think what I'll do is let me read you a page from the book.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because the theme of the book is that Jordan kind of takes all of his cousin's toys and hides them. And he's got a whole pile of them in his room. And they all come over for his birthday and they discover he's taken all their toys. So this happens to be a page with Olivia, who's the oldest. She was 8 at the time.
Yes.
And she discovers his pile of toys.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, Olivia screams, "What are my dancing shoes doing in Jordan's room?" The entire family runs to my private bedroom, and Jackson yells, "My dinosaurs!" And Levi shrieks, "My sea creatures!" And Baker bawls, "Truck!" And Grace cries, "My dolls!" And Mommy looks at me like today will be my last day alive.
Well, it's interesting because while you were reading that, the card that came out was a monkey, and it is the theme of integrity. And so that's very much in line with you talking about, taking someone's toys. Like, what is the integrity um, around that of, hey, is this something that we want to be doing? And so I am being led to read this to follow up as you just read. The situation calls for adaptability and innovation. No matter what's happening right now, you've got to be able to first adjust to the circumstances at hand, then generate creative solution or ideas and act on them. This situation will require you to get your hands on it, take a good look at it, use intelligence coupled with your gut sense to evaluate it, and then choose a course of action. Don't get rigid about your choice, however, as once you make your move, new factors will come into play and you have to adjust your course again, sometimes very rapidly. Count on it. It's the kind of like swinging from the tree to tree. You have to be very quick in anticipating what branch to grab hold of. Don't get discouraged if one direction doesn't pan out. Just be willing to shift and it will all work out from time to time, which is interesting because that was what the first picture had was pictures of clocks juggling time. Use that keen mind of yours to stop and assess what's happening. Then continue on, perhaps with a slight change in course based on new information. Once you stop and look back, you'll see that everyone moves timely and purposefully. You have an amazing ability to move through life in a fluid and poetic fashion, whether or not you're aware of it. It just doesn't get stuck in old habits and routines. Trust in that you can do no wrong. And then additional meanings talks about dexterity, cleverness, inquisitiveness, and innovation. So, interestingly, enough, is there something that you're balancing right now? Like,
Something done what?
struggle. Is there something that you're balancing, struggling with right now?
Interesting you say that, because my concern is that 30% of grandparents are classified as being remote. In other words, they don't really care about being involved in the lives of their grandchildren.
Mm,
That means one out of every three of us, and I'm talking about us baby boomers, really don't want to get involved with their grandkids. They may see them on a birthday or maybe see them during the holidays, but that's about it. They don't get involved in their lives. And
mm,
so the question is, why is that? Why are there so many of us baby boomers that are just saying, hey, I raised my kids, I raised
mm-hmm,
could let them worry about raising their kids. I got to go play pickleball. So the question is, why are there so many of us not involved? I mean, a lot of it is that's caused by our kids. Okay. In other words,
yes.
we as grandparents may not have liked the spouse our kids married. So that causes a lot of tension and anxiety. We may be giving our kids unsolicited advice that they don't
Hmm.
really want. We may show up at their house unannounced, which they don't really want. So we are causing a lot of that. We're undermining the parents' authority by challenging what our kids are teaching their kids.
Mm,
Because that's who we are. And so we tend to play maybe favorites and manipulate these little kids. Now,
mm,
all of us have favorites, but I will never tell anyone who my favorite is. I won't even tell my wife, because you got to treat them all the same. You know,
mm,
we try to buy our kids, our grandkids through money or transactions, vacations. But one of the things
mm,
we have to look inside ourselves as baby boomers is, you know, we may have an overall lack of empathy. We've gotten older and we can't understand how to share our feelings and so forth with these grandkids. So going back to my concern is that one out of three of baby boomers just don't want to get involved with their grandkids. And we have got to get involved for all the things we talked about earlier.
mm,
They've got all this great information as they're growing up. We need to help offset that with teaching and learning and taking them out to play kickball and doing things outside of what they're learning on the internet. And so you ask, do I have a concern? That's my concern.
mm. Interesting. Because the card that came out here is a gentleman that's thinking and looking at, like, okay, how do we solve this particular problem situation that we're going on? And it's like focusing on the negative, like what's hurting the situation, the concern with that. But I want to tell you that the crystal that I was drawn to today, as I was thinking about connecting with you, was Dolomite. Excuse me, not Dolomite. I'm thinking of the dog named Dolomite, but the Dalmatian. And here's what this crystal represents: helps you achieve goals, brings awareness, alertness of danger, boosts playfulness, happiness, strengthens relationships, reflects negativity, calms animals, promotes self love, self realization, a stabilizing stone, which goes back to here when we're talking about being off balance. This gentleman here is sitting on a stone, and we're talking about what do we think about negativity. And you were mentioning the word like play, taking the time to like just even connect with the grandchildren, the youth, playing with them, kind of thing. So you're definitely connecting with this energy and hoping individuals will be encouraged to think about the playfulness that they had when they were kids and how they can bring that energy back, um, to the youth today. So, and like I said, I think it's also connected with the fact that, yeah, when we were growing up, it wasn't always about the electronics and what's online and all that, but it was really just going out in nature, swinging from the trees. We used to swing from the monkey bars, like, all the time. And then having, books read to us and all those kind of things. So I just even want to encourage someone who may not have had that experience, maybe themselves, but realizing that, forgiving that energy, but then deciding I want to change that for maybe another child that didn't have, um, that experience, yet in their life. And so you're doing great things, great work. I appreciate you coming and sharing and connecting with me today. So, where can individuals find your book and find you if they want to follow up?
Well, let me follow up with, all these things led me with three other baby boomers to create a site for baby boomers called babyboomer.org.
Okay.
And that this site is now live. And the reason we did this is, our generation is as diverse as anyone before and after us,
Yeah.
religiously, politically, so forth. But the one thing that baby boomers have in common is we have a shared experience because when we were growing up, there were three television stations. Everybody had a landline. So we all got the same information. So,
Yeah.
we were there for the Kennedy assassinations and Martin Luther King, and we were there for landing on the moon, and birth control became widespread during our generation. We were there for
Yeah.
Vietnam, all the riots in the streets. But what brings us all together is music. We got Elvis, the Beach Boys, Beatles, Three Dog Nights, the Supremes. We got movies like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, all the Spielberg movies like Jaws, Animal House, Star Wars, The Godfather. We have all these common experiences. So we have built this site, babyboomer.org, geared towards baby boomers. So they can find everything they need on this site from health information to playing pickleball to travel to Alzheimer's or to dementia to all kinds of things.
Hmm.
So and that was driven by us realizing that we got to get back involved. These baby boomers, there's 70 million of us. We
Yeah.
have to give back now. It's time for our generation to help give back to all of the newest and greatest kids coming up today. And so that's what led me to build this site at babyboomer.org.
Well, thank you so much, Gramps Jeffrey, for dropping those wisdom and then resharing that with others via that website. It has been a pleasure connecting with you today. Thank you for those that have watched. I do hope that you were encouraged to live smart and send to new levels of success. And this has been another episode of All Intuitive Conversation.